Hi, good morning. It's Gene from maverickstar Observatory. As always, guys, before we begin, big thanks to our people that are supporting the observatory with a small donation here and there. That is at the end of the day what keeps us going. So let's get on with it. You might be surprised when I tell you that when you look at your compass, what you see pointing to, there's nothing there. There's no magnetic pole there. It's just a situation that has arisen as two strong poles, one in Canada and one in Russia, has managed to form. And as a result, when you get two magnets and you position them by your compass, if you do this experiment at home, you'll see what I'm talking about. What you'll find is that the compass needle will be in the middle of the two of them, and that is exactly the case for what we are seeing today. You can see on the map a weak intensity over Canada, and that's the reason why the pole migrated originally over towards the mid-Atlantic, almost the north mid-Atlantic ridges, whereas the magnetic north pole is right now. We'll have a look at that a bit later on in the video, but that's where it is. And as a result of Russia intensity, the magnetic intensity there increasing, it has pulled that magnetic dipole, is what we see where our compasses are pointing towards it. And as Canada fades out with its intensity, what's going to happen is that magnetic north pole is going to go over towards where Russia is right now. And it's going to be interesting to see whether that magnetic intensity over Russia remains there. So we got a situation where when we look at our compasses, it points at something, but really there is nothing there. It's just a coincidence that these two intensities are fighting over the magnetic north pole right now, and as a result it points in between the two. But we know where it's heading. We can see a clear path towards it, and now when we can see the intensity increasing over Russia just below the Arctic Circle, we know exactly where it's heading. So our next port of call really is to study what's going on in Russia and monitor that intensity there. I will say this, that if the magnetic pole does end up in Russia, what's going to happen is the temperatures and the Arctic climate is going to shift along with it. There's no coincidence that there are three anomalies over the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere that are all there together, and we should not allow ourselves to think that they're there just by coincidence, because I do think that this is part of the planetary mechanics which is allowing this to happen. And those three anomalies are the rotational axis, the Arctic climate, and the magnetic pole. All three of these, I believe, are linked, and you can see this when we or in the past, if you look for the videos, I might show you again today. If you look at the magnetic field of the Earth map and compare it with temperature map, you'll see the same correlation, almost the same pattern. Where these intensities are the coldest regions on our planet, and it's by no mistake. And they're moving, and therefore we shouldn't be surprised when we see the climate moving along with them. We know that some of the things that are affecting climate change right now, and I believe now that a lot of people are starting to scratch their heads, because they're wondering now in Europe, like we are in the UK, why have we got temperatures so low at this point in the year, breaking records. And largely is down to what began 30 years ago, was a rapid acceleration of the magnetic pole. Just to give you a bit of information on that, in the last 30 years we've seen the magnetic north pole migrate 1,200 miles plus, and 90 years previous to that it had only migrated 500 years in distance, 500 miles, sorry, in distance. So there's a big shift in the acceleration of the magnetic North Pole, and when we compare climate, and I think you'll agree with me, if you're of a certain age, you'll have noticed that over the last 30 years, the climate has definitely changed noticeably. There's no doubt about when mainstream media now talk about climate change, it's true, it's absolutely happening. It's not man-made, it's not carbon related, and this is not something that we have set up through industrial revolution. If we go back into that period of time, we can see that nothing much was happening with the climate, and hasn't until really recently. So in the 1900s, the magnetic pole began to shift, and then when it got to 1990, it accelerated, nearly doubling its speed as it migrated towards Russia. And as a result of that last component of acceleration, we have started to see a dramatic change in our climate. Now, can you imagine what we would expect to see when the poles begin to really reverse? Another acceleration. Well, we should expect more dramatic weather anomalies that we've slowly become accustomed to. The problem is with ourselves is that when things are gradual, it's hard to notice the change. If things went from the way we was enjoying weather and climate in the 1990s to the way we experience climate and weather today overnight, if it happened overnight, it would be shocking. We would instantly all know something was going on. And this is what I try and explain to people. Mainstream media and mainstream organisations have got it completely wrong. They've focused on CO2 instead of the magnetic North Pole migration. Something that was completely obvious, that hasn't happened a long time, in such a long time, 780,000 years, 500,000 years or 500,000 years overdue. They've completely overlooked it. And yes, big organisations do make mistakes, but they couldn't tax the magnetic North Pole, but they can tax CO2. And it's a good way of raising money. There's nothing really mankind can do to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. Even if human beings on this planet become CO2 neutral tomorrow, it won't change a thing, because our input with regards to the amount of gigatons that the oceans put out, and all other sources put out, ours is the least significant. It's incredible that they've managed to get away with blaming CO2 for climate change, and they're still pushing it. And they're pushing industries now to change that much and that dramatic, that they are proposing to be CO2 neutral by 2030. And we see these electric cars being manufactured more and more and more. And the problem is that if people are going to start using electric vehicles, then we are going to need more energy being produced from power stations. And when we look at what options we've got, they're very limited. We've got coal, wind turbine generation, which we know fails in winter and when there's no wind. We've got solar energy, converting solar radiation through photovoltaic cells to produce electricity, which only runs when on a nice sunny day at optimum performance. We've got nuclear power, which is clean at the point of creating power, but dirty with regards to its waste, and can pose serious impacts on the environment if something goes wrong. Mentioning just quickly Fukushima. And then we have some of the methods that are being used right now experimentally to create energy in the future, and I do not have a lot of faith in those, and I'm talking about nuclear fusion, because there has been no success in a laboratory method where it has been sustained, and already they have taken it to building, bigger and more expensive fusion reactors, and they cannot sustain it for 2 minutes, the reaction. And these components are very complex. They have to be designed to be serviced and parts replaced, because they have a limited lifespan. Can you imagine this? They've not got it sustained for 2 minutes, and they've already realised that parts are going to break down and it needs to be serviceable. This is something that is never going to ever come about, and I believe the reason for that is because they are basing fusion reaction on what they have learned from the sun, and I don't believe what they see from the sun is actually the case. There's something else that creates our sun that they've not quite got. If they was right in what they were saying, that the sun produces nuclear fusion, then why can't we measure the neutrinos that are coming off the sun as part of that reaction? We should instantly be able to see the amount of neutrinos, and we can do the mathematical equation and answer that question. The truth is that the sun does not emit the amount of neutrinos necessary for the fusion reaction that they see doing as a result, and therefore all this will fail. But getting back to the point, if we're all going to be using electric cars, how is that going to function in cities? Because the pole shift is one thing. There's the reason for all the changes that are taking place. 98% of the people in the world are completely unaware of it, but that's the reason why we are seeing all these dramatic changes with our climate. And then on top of that, we have grand solar minimum affecting it as well. Both low output of sun and weakened magnetosphere means more cosmic rays, means more drag on the jet stream, and therefore we have a malfunctioning jet stream. We get interchange between subtropical and polar jet streams, both over northern and southern hemisphere, and we have this new climate which continues to deteriorate. On top of this as well, guys, if you follow all these things, you'll know that we're on the cusp of going back into a glacial period over the northern hemisphere, which is where the majority of the people live in this world. And that means putting more stress on, a very delicate food production and agricultural method that we've adopted. I could take where we are right now in this video in a lot of other directions. We could talk about, is it worth producing our own food for security of food? But we've evolved. We used to be hunter-gatherers. It took up the majority of our day and our night trying to find food, and then we started farming, which is something that is under attack now by big corporations, by lunatics that have got billions of pounds. And when we took up farming, it required less time to look after a few animals, breed them, so we had more. It'd see us through the winter, and now none of us really have to be farmers. We just have to be a participant in a system like what we've got now, the monetary system or the capital system, and we can just go to the shops and get what we need, and those goods come from all over the world. So it requires less of our time again. But what the world governments are doing, and the reason why I say the psychopaths with big corporations and money are doing, is interfering in things that they haven't got a clue about. I mean, they make decisions that I believe a child wouldn't even make. And even based with the facts, they still blatantly tell lies. And carbon taxes are just that. It's a blatant lie. And just like the pole shift, and the magnetic pole reversal, people are oblivious to it. 98% of the world's human population do not know that this Earth is going through a magnetic pole reversal. and do not know the implications of what it's caused or what it will cause in the future. That's how well informed the public are. Just think about that for a minute. One of the biggest possible catastrophes which we could face has been swept under the carpet and replaced with the CO2 illusion. I'll just leave you with those thoughts, guys. We've got a link down there. Be great if some people would support what we do here at the observatory. We don't just talk on this channel. I hope you realise that, and if you've been following, you certainly will realise that we don't just talk here. We actually put the equipment in the field, monitor it, so we are talking from data. That's where the truth's coming from what we collect and what we see with the data. That's called the scientific method. It's called doing science honestly, and if you're an advocate of that and you want to support it, the links are down there. The only other thing to say is, guys, you take care of your loved ones. I'll be back. Bye for now.